So, a little backstory. I'm a Boy Scout, and on one of my backpacking trips, we decided to go to a place called Eagle Peak, and we never went there before, so it was kind of our first time going. So we had a hike. We had a hike in with our backpacks into this area, and then once we found our campsite, we set up our camps, ate dinner, went to bed, and then we woke up the next morning, ate breakfast, and we also packed up our hydration packs with our trail food and our lunch because we knew that we were gonna be out past lunch, but we didn't know how long it was gonna be. So then we're on a trail and we get to an area where to the left side is a mountain, and to the right side there was another mountain. And the scouts, we knew a general area of where it was, but we didn't know which one it was. So we kind of looked into the adults, and the two adults that knew that either had a GPS or a map had different opinions. One adult said it was to the left. One adult said it was to the right. So some of the older scouts and myself decided to continue on the trail to see if there was a trailhead up ahead that said Eagle Peak was to the left or to the right. And as we started going, we got about like I don't know, like a couple of feet or like a minute. We started walking for like a minute, and then another scout came up telling us to stop because the adult leaders told him to tell us to stop because we were away from the group. So we sat down in the shade and we're waiting there for about 20 minutes, and then finally the adults came up with a decision that would go to the left. And on the left side, it was a mountain, and there was about four peaks, and there was like a steep hill that had rocks that if you put your weight on it, you would fall down. You kind of slide down because they weren't like stable. But thankfully, there were some trees there that would act as like a cushion, as like a brace, as in you could go up, you could walk a couple steps or like run up a little bit, grab onto the tree so you wouldn't fall, and take a breath. And then once we got to the first peak, there's a peak and a couple other hills there, and it wasn't as steep. So we kind of sat there, we're like, okay, it's gonna be lunchtime, or it is lunchtime, so we're gonna eat. But the adult said, no, we're not gonna eat until we get to Eagle Peak. So we sat back up and we started going to the second peak that we saw. And as we're going to the second peak, it was a little bit easier, but still kind of hard. But then we got to the second peak, and it was an Eagle Peak. And then by that time, it was past one, and I was getting really hungry, and I know some of the other scouts were getting hungry. And so then I asked the same adult, I was like, "Hey, can we eat lunch now? Because like all of us are hungry." And he looked at me and said, "No, we're going to eat when we get to Eagle Peak." But thankfully, one of the adults heard my conversation with the other adult and said they need to eat, so we're going to stop now. So we ate lunch there, and some of the older scouts brought like a backpacking stove to heat up food. So we had to wait for them to heat it up, make the food, eat it, and then pack it up. So then once we're done with the second, once we're done with lunch, we looked over and we saw in the distance that there was a peak on the mountain to the right that we could have gone to, and we're like, oh, maybe that was Eagle Peak. But we were already on the left side of the mountain and already too high up to go back down into the right. So we saw, okay, there's a third mountain up there. So we started hiking that way. And once we got to the third peak, we're like, okay, hopefully this is it. But it wasn't. It was not Eagle Peak. So then we're all like tired. We wanted to give up. But then we saw in the distance that there was a fourth and final peak of the mountain. And like, okay, this has to be Eagle Peak. And so some scouts ran to the peak to see if it was, and some adults did. Uh, and then when we finally got there, we realized that it was Eagle Peak. Finally, after three failed attempts, we finally got to Eagle Peak. And we knew that because one of the scouts brought a GPS for geocaching, and there's a geocaching station there. And so the lesson I learned there that day and hope to convey now is perseverance. There will be times in each of our lives that we will walk aimlessly with no idea where to go or how much farther we have to go. Keeping our eyes on the prize and pushing forward will allow us to accomplish anything. When we accomplish something great through hard work, there is no doubt we will be proud. Sometimes the view isn't what's admired in the end, it's the climb.